In this video, we're going to be talking about when you should be sidechaining your snare. I think this is something that's quite often overlooked. A lot of people know about sidechaining your kicks for the obvious reason that a kick and like a sub bass, for example, are usually in the same frequency space and can often conflict, and sidechaining helps fix that problem. But something I do quite a lot to get really punchy snares is sidechain my snares as well, to a lesser degree than the kicks, but enough to kind of alleviate an issue that could come up sometimes. I'm going to show that in this track because I think this is a good example of it. I'm going to quickly play to you the kind of first half of this or so, just because I want you to get a feel for what this sounds like, and I'll explain why this is a type of track where you'd want to do that. So take a listen here. Right, so that part right there, you've probably noticed a couple things. One being the snare is really punchy, and right now the sidechain is on, and I could turn that off to demo what it would sound like without it, which sounds like this. Now, I think it might actually be kind of difficult for a lot of people to hear a difference there. I personally do, but it's very subtle. There are actually better examples where this is much more obvious, but I think just because the snare in this track in particular, it's really low and punchy, it's one of those ones that's like so strong that even without the sidechain, it still really stands out in the mix. But often you'll want to sidechain it because maybe it's falling behind a bit. You might have a lot of loud elements and your snare kind of blends into them. And sidechaining kind of enhances like the transient a bit because it's now on its own, and will make that stick out in a good way, which I think is really nice. But in this particular track, I'm going to play the drums on their own with an EQ up on my master, just so you can see where things are sitting. So let's open up Pro Q4 and take a listen here. So if you see this right here, this is where my snare is. We can solo that as well. This is where the snare is hitting. You see, that's a very low snare. That's below 200 hertz. And if we solo that, you could hear that's still quite bassy. This is something that exists in a very bassy region. So I think in an example like this, a snare that's that low would want to be sidechained, because your bass, if we put on another EQ and just look at the bass here, remember our snare was about here, and listen to how much content is like in this sound in that region. All of this would be conflicting with like that low snare fundamental. And you could see this conflicting too. So let's turn on our sidechain and just we'll play our bass and drums together with this oscilloscope open. Now this might look confusing if you've not used one of these before, but I'm going to point out something to you here. This is our snare right here where my mouse is. And do you see how clear it looks right now? It's the same pretty much every time. Watch what happens here if we turn off the sidechain. Look at that same thing when we hit play. See, every snare hit's a little bit different. And what's happening there is the low end is conflicting with like that fundamental. And you're getting that distortion every single time the snare hits because these two elements aren't really playing nice together. You could notice that as well if we turn off the sidechain on our kick. So I'll leave it on this first time. Right, here's our kick. Like this bit in the beginning here. Look what happens if we turn it off. You're going to see the same thing that's happening to the snare. And with the kick in particular, you could hear it because it's very like low endy. So that's with no sidechain at all, kick or snare, versus this with it all on. So like I say, everyone knows to sidechain your kick, but that kind of gives you a little bit more insight as to when I would sidechain my snares. And as I say, in this example, because the snare is so punchy, you can't really hear it too well, like the difference, but it's very noticeable visually, and with other snares as well that are maybe less prominent. It's kind of the thing that saves it and makes it stand out in your mix in a good way that's like desirable and that you'd want. So that's my insight into that. I hope this video has been helpful to you. If it has, please drop a like on it to show your support, and subscribe for more future content from me. But thank you for watching. I will catch you in the next video.